us to shift blame and pass the buck, led Christ to the cross. And the evidence we have is the indecision and the weakness and the spinelessness of Pilate. But now let's pick up from verse 27. And what we're going to see here is as we pursue this perniciousness of the cross, we see the crime of heartlessness. Heartlessness. Because you see, you never know how wicked you are until you find yourself in a position of authority and power. I remember some of my colleagues, when they didn't have power, were always the people who were championing the cause of the underdog until they were given power. All of a sudden, they became tyrants. I looked at them and laughed because I was in a meeting when the president himself said, just give them some freedom and they will leave us alone. I was in that meeting. And sure enough, they became big bosses because whatever they decided had no impact. The school had no interest. When you get into a position of power, whether it was on the slave plantation or in politics, because you hear people say, if you vote me into power, I will do X, Y, Z. I will provide one dam for every city. I will provide infrastructure. In fact, Accra would become the cleanest city in the whole world. And people vote you into power. Then when they come, they become little tyrants. I'm talking about the president in Ghana. He's the black Donald Trump. They become exact opposite what they had promised. Heartlessness. They could care less what happens to the ordinary person. They hide behind the respectability of their office. They hide behind the respectability of their profession, whether they are police officers, whether they are doctors, it doesn't matter. They hide behind all this. This is what we're going to see in this section in Matthew 27 and verse 27. So here are the soldiers. The moment spineless Pilate ordered Christ to be executed, to be crucified. What the first thing? He summoned the soldiers, verse 27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and assembled a whole battalion over him. Now that's a mouthful. A battalion typically is about 600 soldiers. Is that power necessary? It's like I see a fly on the wall, and instead of swatting it, I ask Kweku to go and buy me bazooka. And then I'm going to kill that fly with a bazooka. This is what is happening. You see the ugliness of the cross. Take care of him. And what do they do? The first thing they did was simply take Jesus into the praetorium and assemble a whole battalion over him. I know some people say before him, but I doubt it, because that preposition allows us to see that they are leaving no stone unturned. They are Roman soldiers, for goodness sake. If this Jesus gets away, they are in trouble. And so they left no stone unturned. I find it funny. I see the picture of a little mouse that is surrounded by a sea of cats. It has no chance. Its only hope of salvation is when the cats begin to fight among themselves. and they forget about him. And you think these people are going to forget about Jesus? No. Greed, heartlessness has taken over. There is no way they're going to forget about this Jesus. So what do? You have a prisoner in your control. The first thing they do, they strip him of his clothes and put a scarlet, a sagum, a scarlet. It's almost like one of those coarse, almost like tunics that the Roman soldiers wore. But think about it for a moment. Why scarlet? That is the color of royalty. So they are mocking him. They are taunting him. As Mark tells us, the color was purple. If he's a king, like Caesar, that's what they're saying. He's a king, like Caesar. But which king would wear this kind of thing in chains like that? That's more concrete. So they had a field day with him. Let's look at verse 29. They wove, as part of this humiliation, as part of this heartlessness, they wove a crown of thorns and then placed it on his head. And then they put a reed in his right hand. Look at the next step. When they had woven this crown of thorns and put it on his head and placed a reed in his right hand, think about it. He's a king. He's wearing royal robes. And he has a reed in his hand. That the sign of authority. Then they poked fun at him by kneeling before him. Hail, King of the Jews. That's heartless. Hail, King of the Jews. And then they derided him like Herod. Remember when Jesus was born and the Magi came, he said, go and search for him. And when you find him, come and tell me so that I also may worship him. He had no intention of worshiping Jesus. He was going to kill Jesus, the baby. Even though he mouthed the words of worship, he had ulterior motives. So we do the same thing here. It's a derisive taunt. You claim to be king of the Jews. You, look at you, comparing yourself to Caesar. How dare you? And so after they've gone through this charade, look at the next thing they did. They pounced him on the head. These are professionals. They are doing their job, if you ask them. But do you have to go this far? Do you? That's the heart of heartlessness. They didn't have to do all that. But they beat him on the head with that. The cross is pernicious. Through the actions of these actors here. And when they had done all that, when they had gone through their professionalism,